All right, pleasant good evening. Welcome to the inaugural Whip-Lash. My name is Christopher Jones. Thank you for joining me on tonight's program. It's Tuesday, the 21st day in the year 2025. And of course, tonight's discussion, we will be looking in depth to Budget 2025, the final budget that will be presented in Guyana by the People's Progressive Party Civic as it makes its way for the incoming government piloted by the APNU AFC. Tonight, joining me on tonight's program for tonight's discussion is no stranger to you, and this is the Shadow Minister for Finance, Ms. Jurita Fernandez, and of course, she is joined by the Shadow Minister of Local Government, Mr. Ganesh Mahipal. Good evening, Ganesh, Jurita. I know it's very late in the year, it's the 21st day, and if I hadn't had the opportunity to extend New Year's greetings to you and your family, let me do so now. And of course, as I mentioned on tonight's program, on Friday coming, we'll commence the debate of the 2025 budget, which essentially it's the final budget of the People's Progressive Party Civic as they make their way out during the upcoming general and regional elections. I would want to start off tonight's program with you, Jaretta, as the Shadow Minister of Finance. This, like last year, is the largest budget ever. What exactly does that mean to the Guyanese people who were looking for reduced cost of living, increased wages and salaries, etc.? Your take on Budget 2025.
Well, good night, Chris, and good night to everyone joining the program tonight. It's always a pleasure to be here and speak with you, the wonderful persons living in Guyana, and those joining from in the diaspora as well. You know, the budget 2025 there was a lot of high expectations coming from budget 2025, given that this is an election year for the PPP. And you would have thought that after not being a government that budgeted for the ordinary man, at least in the last budget that was leading up to the election, they would have been bringing something of substance to the people. But I don't know. It's either that they have a little to no concern, or they're at the point that they believe that they can dish out anything to the citizens of Guyana, and persons are still going to go out there and support them. Budget 2025 lacks any real substance for the working class of Guyana. And it's strange, Chris, because I ended my last presentation, 2024 budget, by speaking about this country is not a country for the working class. And I would have thought that 2025, you would have seen a lot more incentives being put in for the working class, and more so the working poor in the country. We are yet to see any real measures being put together. Policy positions are yet to be formulated to deal with the working poor and to raise their standard of living, to make them at least feel a piece of this oil money and this resource that we are all supposed to be enjoying in 2025, but it is not there.
Okay, so you mentioned the fact of which is true. It is an election year. We are officially in an election year. One would have expected to hear increases in wages and salaries, reduction of the value added tax, and so forth. Is there something that perhaps we are missing? Or is it, as you mentioned, that the People's Progressive Party Civic have become so detached from reality that we saw, once again in this budget, the largest lump sum going towards infrastructure? What is it that they're missing?
Well, they're not first persons would want to say that they're tone deaf or they're detached and so forth. But in my assessment, that this is what the party has become. The PPP, back in the days of Chetty Jagan and so forth, the party was always pro poor initiatives and things like that. And there was a lot of movement from then to now. And the party is no longer a party that is in charge, that is looking at governance. You see, when you talk about government, you're thinking that government should be in place that is safeguarding the well-being of the most vulnerable in society, and that should be a government's priority. But they're at the point right now that they are a government that has set up shop as though it is a private entity. So it's not a case in which they're tone deaf or they're not in sync with the reality on the ground. They're very in sync and they understand, quite frankly, what is going on. But it's a case that they just don't care. They are seeing the money before them and they have made a decision, Chris. The PPP has made a decision that they are going to direct it into the pocket. They're going to direct the bulk of the resources. So don't worry with whatever they're the little trickle-ins that they're giving to other persons, to the poorer persons in society. They have made a conscious decision that they are going to direct the bulk of the nation's resources into the pockets of persons that are already wealthy. They are making businesses have higher profits as against taking care of the ordinary man and assisting persons with policy positions. That's going to make your life better and make you put you in a position to better take care of your family and provide an actual opportunity for you to build generational wealth. This is not just a talk shop kind of a business that should be going on at government. It's all nice to hear. Oh, you're getting 100,000. Oh, go build generational wealth.
Yeah.
How, Christopher Jones, we are seeing generational wealth being built by a few in society. We are seeing the nation's resources being directed to the few, and they are building generational wealth. While a disrespectful idea is coming to the ordinary man, the working poor, for them to take $100,000 and go build generational wealth. So, what we expected to see in Budget 2025 was an actual plan, a structure, a policy that is going to say the working poor will be elevating themselves through this structured approach to governance, but that was absent in Budget 2025.
Excellent. All right, Ganesh, I would bring you in for your thoughts, and then immediately after your thoughts, I would want to go into um, allegations of corruption in government. I know we can't use the word corruption in Parliament, but we can use it on this program, and I would want to, with you guys, examine all of those allegations from the various ministers to ministers' children, ministers' spouses, and so forth. But first, your opening comments about budget 2025.
Well, good night to you, Chris. Good night, Juretta, and good night to the viewership. I want to agree in totality with what Juretta said earlier. I don't know if I can put it any better. And just to say succinctly that this budget was a very disappointing budget. I honestly expected a greater focus on the social services and a greater focus on improving the lives of our people, not by way of just handing out or doling out cash. I welcome that. I think there should be more, but I wanted to see a greater focus on improving them at the level of education and at the level of health, because one knows that you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have an educated nation and you don't have a healthy nation, then it will not be used properly for the development of your country. And I have made reference before that simply building a road or building a bridge or building any infrastructure can be done by any government. That is not something difficult. If you have the resources, you can do it. So there's no need for us to celebrate the building of roads and bridges and other infrastructure under the Ministry of Public Works. Any government could do that. What we should be celebrating is if the roads are built properly, if the bridges are built properly, and you see that there is a rush to complete the construction of roads, but ask yourself, how many of those roads have proper walkway that caters for pedestrians? Ask yourself, how many of those roads have well lit lamp posts? Ask yourself, how many of those roads are withstanding the test of time? Or is there a rush to just do 500 or 5,000 roads, but no interest in doing it properly? And that is a fundamental problem that I have with the manner in which the resources are being expended. I again say, any government could have done those roads had they have the amount of resources like what the People's Progressive Party is enjoying. Sherrod Duncan made the point, and we all know this, that that 4-lane road that runs from Mandela to Diamond and is hopefully going to go to Timeri, Soosdijk, and up to Chedijagan International Airport area, that land was designated for that purpose since Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham time. It was always there for that purpose, but the money was never available to do it.
Right.
And now that you have the money, you can do it. The Demerara Harbor Bridge outlived its span, its appointed years, continued to provide us with the service, and now that we have the resources, we can be able to enjoy a new Demerara River Bridge. And that goes for several other infrastructure projects. The resources are finally here,
Yeah.
and we can finally get to do what we want to do in terms of infrastructure. The problem is it is not done properly. And that is very much annoying. And it is a case where you are recognizing after 2, 3 years, you got to go back to the same projects that you did, the same roads that you did because of poor mixture, because of not enough amount of steel, because they're using the BRC fabric and they're not using materials that can really, or aggregates that can really give the strength that one needs on these roadways. And then you turn now and you do that comparison to see, or you juxtapose it to the fact that here is a country with huge amount of resources, but what are they doing in terms of increasing the pass rate at maths and English? What are they doing in terms of their primary tertiary education institution, their premier institution, the University of Guyana, that is supposed to be producing us with graduates so that they can come and serve this country in higher capacities. What is it that is going on in the health sector at the various institutions that we have? West Demerara Regional Hospital, Georgetown Hospital, Mabaruma, New Amsterdam. These are existing institutions. Yes, we are focusing on constructing new ones too, but don't forsake these institutions that are there and are currently providing the services. Show us how is it that you are modernizing those institutions with the resources to better equip, enable, and make better your people? One of the fundamental problem of this government is that there is a lack of focus on the people. And you can't give me $100,000 and tell me take that, that's enough. No, there has to be a greater focus on uplifting us from the nightmare that we currently find ourselves in. And you don't see any plan. You don't see any forward thinking. You don't see any strategy to elevate us, to lift us as a nation, to make us wealthier via education, to empower us via education, to keep us healthy via health. You don't see a focus in that regard. And for
You
me, because of those factors, I think Budget 2025 is a great disappointment to this dear land.
Great disappointment indeed. You mentioned the building of hospitals. I note recently Minister Frank Anthony was on the National Communications Network. And of course, there he was speaking about the new regional hospitals that are going to be built and so forth, because they like to put out these structure. But just last evening, we saw on Credible Source the outfit by Sherrod Duncan, which showed that nurse, or that doctor rather, from Tamari Health Center, and she was outlining the situation that they have there at the health center. And of course, that health center essentially is a microcosmism of what is happening across the country, because you have many facilities in which you have the nurses there, but there's no medication for people. How is it that a government, the People's Progressive Party civic government, can say to the world that Guyana, the fastest growing economy in the world, with a population of less than 1 million people, We've just put out a budget of 1.3 plus trillion dollars. And in the basic health centers, they don't have things like Panadol, flushable toilet, etc. Jurita, I'll bring you in on this.
I think that was one of the more one of the points rather that hit home to Guyanese, and I believe that's one of the most watched videos I've seen on online of recent, because it brings into reality. You know, when Ganesh and I, we both on the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, and for all of the years we have been doing what is called financial audits. You go and you make the budget as it's being presented now. It's passed in the National Assembly, and then we go out into and then the money go out into to the various agencies and they spend it. And what the audit office does for all the years is they do a financial audit to see whether or not those monies were spent in accordance with the financial laws of the country. Why I'm saying this, Christopher, is because we need to go further now. It's not always just looking to see if the money is spent going through all the correct financial channels, but more importantly, when it comes to governance, it's important for us to see whether the money spent for the programs and projects that were designed by government actually had the impact that it
Correct.
was intended to have. And this is where the PPP fails tremendously. So now you have, and a lot of other developed countries, is they're moving away from completely doing financial audits to what we call now performance audits, because the
Yeah,
performance audits is a value for money. It's more, it gives more of the impact assessment of what these monies were used to do and whether or not it accomplished what it was set out to accomplish. What we heard from that doctor there at the Tamiri Health Center is that the money is being injected into the Ministry of Public Health, the Ministry of Health there. It is not getting to where it needs to be. The impact of those resources are not being felt. It's not being felt by the persons that are utilizing the service, by the doctors that are working within the system. There is a failure. It is saying that the monies, that the billions of dollars that are being spent in health is either being stolen or it's been lost in, and I'm going to use a very technical terminology here that is being utilized by the IMF, and so they say it gets lost in inefficiencies. It means it gets lost in the corruption that is in Guyana. So when you put when billions of dollars are being budgeted into the health sector, what you're hearing now is that it is not get into where it needs to be, and the health sector is not being impacted as much as it should be impacted by the amount of money that is being spent there. Because Tamiri is not behind God back Christopher Jones and
correct,
Ganish Paul. It is
correct.
right there. And if the nurse, Dr. Rada at Tamiri Health Center is saying that she's not getting basic things like gloves, blades, Panadols, it's simply saying that along that line, the money is lost and it's been pocketed somewhere instead of being spent where it is intended to be spent. So that is just a glaring example of how the PPP operates. Because coming back to the National Assembly, you're going to see a bigger budget every year for the Ministry of Public Health. But is that really impacting the health service that you are receiving as citizens of the country? Or is it really impacting the working conditions that the staff in the health sector is facing? And that is a resounding no all around. It is not doing that. So where is that money going? I think that's a bigger question that the ministers have to answer at this point.
You know, we can turn to corruption, friends, family, favorites of the People's Progressive Party Civic. I think by now across Guyana, it is no secret that there is massive corruption in almost every government ministry and agency. And we've spoken at length as it relates to successive People's Progressive Party civic government about nepotism and all of this, cronyism and all of that. We've seen now allegations about ministers of the government, spouses getting contract, We've seen allegations of ministers of the government, children getting contract from the very ministry that their parents is operating under. And these contracts are contracts for 400 plus million dollars. Now, from 2020, when the People's Progressive Party Civic came to office, to last Friday when they passed that budget, when that budget was tabled rather, which essentially is the final budget of the PPP for this cycle because they're about to go out of government. But when you total all of those budgets and the supplementaries, it totals some 4.966 4,966 billion plus dollars. And you've just mentioned about the health center and the impact that these monies are having on the Guyanese people. We've seen posts about potable water not coming to communities. We've seen posts about people, transportation, road, you name it. Ganesh, you've covered on many occasions issues about corruption, about contracts that were awarded without even going through the tender board system. So we'll take it from there and then we go on down the line.
Chris, I heard you
I
say
noticed the smile.
no, well, I heard you saying $4.966 trillion. Am I correct, Juretta? You're better with the numbers.
But if before Gansh, if you want me to just run the numbers before you start, what and persons need to understand because the PP is very slick. Because
Yeah.
from 2020 to 2024, the PP came to the National Assembly for 3.193 trillion dollars, right? That is between 2020 to 2024. However, they came back for supplementals, and between the supplementals and what they couldn't spend, at the end of that period, Christopher, at the end of that period, they actually spent 3.373 trillion. When you add on the allocation that they're coming for budget 2025, it is going to bring you to $4.987 trillion.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Just to give you the direct numbers.
So, Joretta, if you notice, I had my head down, and that's because I was actually writing down the figure so
Yeah.
that people can actually understand
Yeah.
when we say trillion,
Yeah.
what it really is.
Yeah.
It's not
When
fitting
we
on your
talk, look at
screen,
the amount.
Ganesh.
Huh?
Right. Yeah.
It's
So,
not
so
even
just
fitting on your screen.
right. Just hold. Right. Just go a little bit to your left, Ganesh. Good. Right there. So that's the figure essentially for the past 4 years under the People's Progressive Party Civic. This is the amount of monies from budget and supplementaries, a total thus far of 4,987 billion dollars. $1 billion.
And
And the
there's some other numbers that have to fit in where these
correct,
zeros are, but I
correct,
just
correct.
put
So
the zero so people could understand when you do, when you do primary school and early secondary school math, they always tell you that the first zero, ones, tens, thousands, and you go on and on and on. And
correct.
so some people have never even seen a number this big. And I
That's
know
right.
that for a fact. Some
That's right.
people have not even in this country seen what $1 million look like. A simple
Exactly.
$1 million, which is one with 6 0. And if you are to look at it carefully, we are talking here about when you say 4 trillion, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 zeros.
Yeah.
So if you want to understand what is $1 trillion, just write 1 and 12 zeros after.
Yeah.
And see if you could reach the money.
I know, and
This,
not only reach the money, ask yourself this question. After the People's Progressive Party Civic has gotten that amount of money, have your life changed?
yes, that's another question I was coming to. What impact,
Yeah.
when you do a comparison to where you were in 2020, when we only had a $300 billion budget?
Correct.
Only $300 billion budget, and you know where you were in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
How much have you changed for the better
Yeah.
now that we're in 2025? And
Yeah.
if I may go back to Juretta made a very important point about generational wealth, and only a few
Yeah.
are getting the opportunity, and not in an honest way, to accumulate generational wealth. But before that, we were talking about health. And an important point to note is that the People's Progressive Party have always not focused on spending a lot to improve what we have. And you would know, under the PPP, we had death rates at the hospitals going up, pregnant mothers losing their babies,
And
losing
double up on
themselves
beds.
to death, the bed not enough to cater for patients, and you had so many cases. And I was doing some numbers, and I know Juretta is good with numbers too. In 2013, the PPP spent 8.5% of their total budget, 8.5% on health. In 2014, they spent 9.9%. 2015, they spent 9.5, but that was shared between the coalition and the PPP. The first full year of the coalition in 2016, we spent 11.9% of our budget,
Mhm.
higher than what the PPP spent in health. In 2017, we increased it to 12.5%. And that is why you are seeing results
Yeah.
in the health sector under the coalition. You were not getting 100% results that you wanted. There were still some hiccups. We were still cash strapped, so to speak. We did not have $1 trillion budget, and we were able to still spend on health, and we were getting returns. 2018, we spent 17.6% of our total budget. Now, pay careful attention. Without oil,
Yeah.
we were able to spend 17 at highest 17% on our 17.6% on our health budget, and lowest being 11.9% in health. In 2021, which was our first oil budget, if I'm not mistaken, Juretta, it was our first oil budget where we got some
Correct.
money from oil and we put it into the budget. So it was a higher budget. I
As in
think
PPP.
2021,
As in
20,
PPP.
as in PPP budget.
Mhm.
Juretta, if I'm not mistaken, 2021 figure was 300 plus billion dollars.
383.
$383 billion,
Yes.
higher than the coalition years,
Yeah.
higher than
Yes.
the previous PPP years. And they spent 16% on health,
But
16% of that budget.
Ganesh, it's important for you to know also that for 2021, the revised figure was 404.8.
404.8 billion.
Correct.
So it was even higher in 2020. They spent 15.5% of that sum on health. But it gets worse as the budget keeps climbing, and you expect them to focus on health and the infrastructure surrounding health, the bettering of nurses and doctors and all the medical staff there to provide the services. In 2022, they spent 13.2% on health. In 2023, they spent 11% on health. In 2024, 11.6% on health.
Mhm.
So my earlier comments about them not focusing on it is not something that is unknown. The statistics are there to show that they have no interest. And even if you look, there are more statistics that can be presented. If you look at the number of nurses per 10,000 population, in 2013, it was 15.3%. In 2014, it was 30.5%. 2015, 31.4%. Those are PPP years.
Mhm.
APNU AFC years, 2016, 36.2%. 2017, 37.8%. 2018, 36.9%. So you see, there were more nurses per 10,000 population under the coalition without oil.
Yeah.
Without oil. Now you would have thought that there's oil, there is more money,
Yeah.
there ought to be better in terms of what we're providing to our nurses and so on. Here we have in 2021, 22 nurses per 10,000 population. In 2022, 21.9 nurses per 10,000 population. 2024, 21.8. We keep decreasing in our resources, our human capital, our human resources. So when I say that building bridges, good, they're not proper bridges, so it could be better. Building roads, good, they're not proper roads, so it ought to be better. But what are you doing about the people that are supposed to be the engine, the driving force of ensuring that Guyana becomes better? We are doing absolutely nothing. Nothing, and you are seeing it in the numbers how it is decreasing, and it is abysmal. We
Yeah.
talk about generational wealth, Juretta. The few at the top, we categorize them friends, families, and favorites. They're creating or opening contract companies to bid for contracts. I heard, by the way, and I ought to put this out, I'm gathering more information that Sue, the famous Sue, Jagnio best friend Sue,
Yeah.
is in receipt of contracts under a different company name, and he is currently executing work in Cummins Lodge. I have somebody who sent me some pictures, and I'm gathering some more information, and it will be released at the opportune time. But Sue is right here in Guyana. But the point I'm making is that these few people, they are being treated in an extra special way, accommodated outside of the legal provisions that speak to how a contract ought to be awarded, and then you are ending up seeing a special grouping suddenly getting rich. And
Exactly.
that is creating issues with the people who actually struggled to get rich, the people who actually towed the line to get rich. So there is a battle between the rich who are rich through hard work and the rich who are now and suddenly rich. They
Hmm.
have their own battle. Look at that that pump station at Bellevue
Hmm.
that the infamous critic
Yes,
is in
ma'am.
receipt of. Not a single work of progress has happened for close to a year. It is at a state where you got to really start over, because all he was doing was digging out the overburden, making the buffer dam, and suddenly work halted. The contract is still in his hands, no movement to remove it, but in the first place, he was not qualified to get it. And when you bring out these kind of information, when you bring out these factual data, they want to come on air and attack you personally and make all sorts of comments and talk about what did you do and what you
Yeah.
didn't do. I am beyond that.
But that,
As I told my brother, I got alligator skin, so it, you can't bore it so easy. The facts remain the facts. You ought to ensure that you pay attention to the laws that exist. And I've made this point to Juretta that the documentation in terms of what is written in law, reference the Procurement Act, reference the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, and all other acts surrounding finances of this country. They are well documented, some can be revised. But if it is followed with a conscience of honesty and decency, with a good intention, we can have a better Guyana. But
but
it is being
Ganesh,
abused.
but outside of that, I mean, I want us to. Well, we've been doing that for a number of years, but I think to some extent it still continues to fall on deaf ears for some reason or the other. The budget that was presented on Friday, which represents 1.3 plus trillion dollars is essentially four times an APNU AFC's budget, four times the amount. And just during the coalition's 4 year, public servants at the end of that tenure were able to garner 77% increase overall in wages and salaries. With the People's Progressive Party Civic just passed that budget 1.3 plus trillion dollar, which is four times that of the APNU. Four times. Public servants to date can't get a proper increase in wages and salaries.
It's 35. Chris, what is so it's sad, but I need to point out the fact that it was none other than Irfan Ali that stood in the National Assembly and spoke about 50% when he was in opposition, when the coalition government was in office, running the country on with running the economy without oil resources. And he stood and he said, the 50%. And he had the face, the gall, the barefacedness to present the numbers. Just recently, it was back last month when he was speaking about the increases. And he said, we brought up, we increased by 35%. 35% with all the money spent from 2021 to 2024, all oil budgets.
Yeah.
He was proud to say that wages and salaries went up by 35%.
Exactly.
This is a reality that persons have to face. When persons show you where their resources are being spent, you know who they value. So if the resources are not being spent on the people, you know that they do not value the people. And this is the realization that I want everyone to wake up to. If you see the resources, the bulk of the resources going to the contractor class, I think Kemraj has the corrupt capitalist contractor class of the PPP, then you understand where their value lies. And it is for us, and I'm going to repeat this on every program I go on, Chris. It is for the citizens of Guyana to wake up and decide that they value themselves more than the PPP is valuing them. It's only then you will see a change, because if you do not believe that you are worth more than what is being handed out to you right now, then we still have a problem. You have to wake up and realize that this country has wealth enough to raise your standard of living to a point that you could have never imagined before. We all came from situations in this country. This country had poverty. I'm not even going to get into the poverty rate on this show, Christopher, because it's a very long conversation. But if you go back years and see the rate of poverty in Guyana, it has not changed. It has gotten worse. How is it that we are spending more money in 2025 and the rate of poverty in the country has not changed? It is not getting any better. It goes to show that the resources being spent is being spent through a structure that is willful and deliberately not allowing those money to get down to the most vulnerable persons in society for them to raise their standard of living. Is a very important conversation for us to have as a nation. We have to value ourselves. We have to believe and we have to know that we are worth more than the trickles that is being given out to us through the PP administration.
The PPP believes in cash grants and these cash handouts and so forth. With a budget of 1.3 plus trillion dollars, the pensioners of this country were given $5,000.
Wow.
$5,000. Those receiving public assistance, $3,000.
5,000 Guyana dollars.
And the PPP is proud.
I have a fundamental issue with the old age pension and the public assistance. Mm-hmm. Well, more so the old age pension. And I ought to mention it here. Old age pension is now, will be at the end of this budget, $41,000.
Yeah.
And that $41,000 will be given to 76,000 senior citizens.
Allegedly.
Point noted. Yeah. 41,000 to 76,000. Let's use that figure for now. But there are, from this 76,000 people, senior citizens, there are 25,000 who are benefiting from a subsidy in water supply. I think it's $10,000 subsidy, water supply. And then there are 35,000 or thereabout that are benefiting from this electricity subsidy, which is $20,000. Now, understand what I am saying. 76,000 is what we have as our senior citizens. These people toiled in the soil. They moved Guyana from where it was 15, 20, 30, 50 years back, and they have put us where we are. It is our duty and our obligation to honor them, to give them a proper living condition. It is our duty and our obligation to give them a proper pension. But it cannot be where we give some a benefit and then we take away or we don't give to some. Now, not because the light bill and the water bill is in your name, you gonna get it, and it is because it is not in your name, you not gonna get it. Doesn't mean that you're not consuming it. It doesn't mean that you're not consuming water or you're not consuming electricity. You still got to use electricity where you are. The very people who are getting it, the senior citizens who are getting it, there are also senior citizens who are not getting it but are still using water and
Yeah.
electricity. There are areas in this country that don't even have GWI service. So how you expect the people them to get your GWI water service? There are areas in this country that don't even have GPL service, but you have senior citizens there. They should equally benefit. So I am saying, Chris,
Mhm.
that senior citizens across the table should all be given $100,000 to begin with.
Yeah. I
$100,000 to begin with.
mhm.
That will incorporate this 10,000 subsidy for water and 20,000 subsidy for electricity, and they make it uniform. Because listen to me, the people who are not benefiting from these subsidies, the senior citizens that are not benefiting from it, they still got to go and get water somewhere,
Right.
or they got to go and get electricity somewhere, whether it's via solar that they had to purchase, it got to be maintained, you have to have batteries, if it's a generator, you got to buy fuel and the likes. So there's a cost that is attached to water and electricity, whether you're receiving it from GPL and GWI or not.
Yeah.
So you cannot treat our senior citizens one set as privileged and the other set as underprivileged. We have to treat them equally.
With
And
10
I am
minutes.
saying,
Sorry.
let us remove this unfair, discriminatory practice and bring it into a semblance of normalcy, where when Juretta turns 65 and she wants to still live in Bartica, or when I turn 65 and I want to go to somewhere in the interior, Juretta and I should be getting the same pension package.
Yeah. You said when Jurita turns 65, so I was about to say that's in another 45 years from now. Um,
You're correct.
with 10 minutes to the 8 o'clock hour. The important question now, and I want to reinforce the point that I made when we started this program. It is essentially the PPP's final budget in office. We are in an election year. We point out just some, and there's many more that you can go in depth with in terms of what is lacking from these budget from the People's Progressive Party Civic. Come general and regional elections slated for later this year, what would the APNU AFC as government do differently? Um, I know you will have likely a whole menu of item, but I would want you to pick one particular item each so that we don't run out of time. And on subsequent program, we will continue that discussion. What will the APNU AFC, once in office in this year, 2025, do differently? I will start with Jurita and then go to Ginesh.
All right, Chris, it's not about one particular item, but it's about more about the approach
Yeah.
and what the APN UAFC administration did previously differently is what you give an example from. When it comes to a people-centered policy structure, what we do is make sure that we invest in the people. That is your greatest resource. A country's greatest resource is its people. And once you invest in the people, you are going down the right channel. That 77% increase in wages and salary was not by accident. It's a direct injection into the hands of the ordinary Guyanese. It's a direct policy measure to make sure that the working class is able to raise their standard of living and not have to depend on government for a handout at the end of the day. So it's about a structure, and the APN UAFC administration have a track record of dealing with people-centered policy measures. Every policy that is put forward for the people of Guyana, and more importantly, all decisions were made thinking about equity and not just equality. Everything was done in an equitable manner. Persons would remember that when Winston Jordan went out there and he made announcements when it comes to salary increases, he didn't go and say, well, oh, everybody's going to get 10% across the board. He made very well sure that it was done in an equitable manner. So when those differences were announced, he said, oh, 10% here, 8% there, 5% there. He was putting direct policy emphasis to make sure that he was narrowing that gap between the rich and the poor, because that is what the AP and the AFC administration is about. It is not just about empowering a little minute part of the economy. It is about creating a situation and providing policy measures in place that all Guyanese would see the benefit of the resources that we have at our disposal today. So once re-elected, the AP and UAFC administration has to move in the direction that every Guyanese, man, woman, and child, will benefit, and every Guyanese, man, woman, and child will actually have the resources at their disposal that they will actually be able to build generational wealth. And this is the economy, this is the country that we can build. We have the resources, and persons need to, like I said, let us value ourselves a little bit more as a country. Let us go out, kick the PPP out of office so that real policy measures can be put in place so that every Guyanese will be able to benefit, and the standard of living of the ordinary Guyanese, the working class and the working poor, will be a thing of the past. The working poor will be a thing of the past in this country once the resources are managed efficiently and we have the ability, we have the capacity. Let us go forward and make the difference in this country.
Excellent. Mahipal.
Well, I can't put it better than how Juretta put it. That is so accurate, and I endorse every word that she just uttered. And save and except to add now that the policy is one aspect of it, but I want to make the point that 90% of the current leadership of the APNU and the AFC are young people. And we are all basically below the age of 45. And that is something that is very important. During our tenure in government, when we were there 2015 to 2020, we had the guidance of our seniors, and they have pointed us in the direction of understanding the importance of good policy, understanding the importance of strategizing, and putting the work out so that when you get back results, you can see numbers like what I was calling earlier, and you can get value for the effort that you have put in. Additionally, there is the need for a reduction to the point of completely removing corruption from our society. Corruption is an epidemic
Yeah.
in our society. And if that is removed, there will be lots of money to give to the ordinary people to lift them out of the nightmare that they find themselves in. I know that Comrade Aubrey Norton has already said that when it comes to the tender boards, especially, there has to be opposition oversight there. So we in government will ensure that the PPP has a presence on these tender boards because you need to ensure checks and balances. So that is one direct aspect of reducing to the point of removing corruption in your system. There is also that need for us to have respect for the separation of powers. There are too many political interventions happening at the level of our parliament and happening at the level of our judiciary. And there is obviously need for us to have the confirmation of our Chancellor and Chief Justice. And that separation of power must be respected. And you cannot have like what we had and we saw before, where the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs basically trying to impose onto the judiciary. Those things must not happen. So Juretta gave an overarching umbrella of where it ought to be, and I am trying to go into the finer details that are absolutely necessary to strengthen our country so that we can deliver to our people what is rightfully theirs and where we can have a sustainable strategy and development for generations to come. Right now, we have unfortunately and sadly a government that seems to want to pocket everything as though the world is coming to an end and next year we don't need to be here as the human race. And we ought to send a strong signal to the People's Progressive Party that their manner of governing is not what our country need. And we need to have a proper infrastructure in place by way of a government that really will deliver to the people. Chris, as I close, I want to take the opportunity to respect and call out positively, that is, the hardworking men and women of this country in the public sector, in the private sector,
Yeah.
especially our men in blue, black, and white uniform, our policemen and women who line the roadways in the morning hours and make it easy for traffic to flow. I learned today that those ladies and gentlemen, those police officers, they get a standard salary of $105,000 a month,
Wow.
and with the increase in the what was announced to $130,000, but still $130,000 for you to do what you do there as policemen and women, to stand directing the traffic, whether it's rainy, whether it's sunny, you do it and you really make it easy for commuters to use the roadway because without you it would be chaos. I
Yeah.
think you deserve more. You deserve significantly more. And I want to let them know that we in the APNU AFC, we see what you're doing. We feel what you're doing.
Yeah.
And we believe when we empower, educate, and when we deliver to you, you will be able to, like all of us, lift this country out of the nightmare that we currently find ourselves in. Thank you very
Excellent,
much.
excellent. But Ganesh and Jarita, you could have said it better, and of course, all of Guyana agree. The fact of the matter, as I mentioned before, that under the AP and UAFC government, our budgets were somewhere between 300 and something billion dollars. The PPP have just tabled a budget for 1.3 plus trillion dollars, which is essentially four times that of the AP and UAFC government. Every single public servant, whether it's a policeman, the soldiers, the nurses, the doctors, the teachers, you name it, at least that budget, we were expecting to hear super increases in wages and salaries. because we have the money. I would end this program like I did one of my budget presentation, I think in 2020, 23, in which Dr. Chetty Jagan had said during that time that you cannot live a Cadillac lifestyle in a donkey cart economy. But right now, with Guyana being an oil producing country, it is clear that Guyana now have a Cadillac economy. But it is the People's Progressive Party Civic who have the Guyanese people living a donkey cart lifestyle. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the inaugural Whip-Lash. My name is Christopher Jones, and I would like to take the opportunity to extend my appreciation to Jarita Fernandez, Shadow Minister of Finance, and Ganesh Mahipal, Shadow Minister of Local Government and Regional Development. Ganesh Mahipal said that the People's Progressive Party Civic are in office, and essentially they're thieving like there's no tomorrow. Like next year, it's the end. But essentially, the PPP is thieving today because they realize the end of their administration is the year 2025. On behalf of all of us here at the APNU AFC, we do invite you back here for another program of Whip-Lash, and that was going to be on Thursday at 7 p.m. Stay tuned. Our colleague and friend Sherrod Duncan in the ring starts right now. Have a pleasant rest of your evening. Goodbye.